All right, today we're going to be diving into some tips to help you with the laws of exponents. First one we have to remember is that when you multiply, you're going to add. Number two, you're going to, if you're dividing, you want to subtract. Number three, if you raise a power to a power, then you're going to multiply. It's kind of a bigger deal. When you raise a power to a power, you multiply. The fourth tip is no negatives. So when you have a negative exponent, you're going to take the reciprocal. Take the reciprocal and then change to positive. Okay, the fifth thing, anything raised to the 0th power is just 1. And then the last thing to remember is never apply these laws of exponents to non-exponents. All right, now we're going to do a few examples where we're going to use those tips, and we'll talk about some common mistakes that people often make when they're using the laws of exponents. Okay, first example, we've got 3x to the 7th power, y to the 3rd. That's going to get multiplied by 4x y to the 6th. Now, the 3 and the 4 are not exponents. They're just whole numbers. So if you just had 3 times 4, you would just multiply them together and you get 12. Then you're going to look for bases that are the same. So this is a base that's the same as this one. The x's have the same base. That's x. So we're going to keep that base, and then we're going to go ahead and add the exponents. Because when we multiply bases that are the same, we're going to add the exponents. Now there's a 7 there, but there's also a 1 here that we never write, because there's no need to write a 1 for an exponent. We're just kind of used to numbers like 4 also has a 1 here, but we don't ever write it, okay? But you have to remember it. So 7 plus 1 makes 8. You also have bases that are alike here, the y and the y. So we're going to keep the y, and then we're going to add the 3 and the 6 for a total of 9. And that's your final answer. Okay? Here's another one. We've got 12x to the 3rd, y to the 3rd. That's going to be divided by 4, x to the 9th, y. Remember, the 12 and the 4, those are not exponents, so you're just going to divide it. What's 12 divided by 4? Or if you wanted to reduce that fraction, that's going to become 3. Now, we have x to the 3rd divided by x to the 9th here. So that's the x and the x are the same base, so I'm going to keep it, and then I'm going to do the 3 minus 9. So 3 minus 9 gives me negative 6. Here I have a y and a y, so I'm going to keep the y. And I have 3 minus 1. Don't forget that y has a 1 as an exponent right there that we don't write. So it's y to the 3 minus 1 makes 2. And then, now if you'll remember the third thing we had to remember, it was no negative exponents. We have a negative exponent here. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to change that. I'm going to keep the 3. And I'm going to keep the y squared because I'm not going to deal with them. There's no negative exponents, so they're just minding their own business, so they're going to stay up there in the numerator. But this 6 to the negative 6 is going to get moved downstairs to the denominator. So I write 6 and I keep it positive. X to the 6th power. And that's my final answer. So here's an example where we multiplied. So we did mostly adding. Here we're doing some dividing, so we're subtracting. And then we also had the negative exponent where we had to consider you doing the reciprocal and moving it. Here's a third example. We've got 4, x to the 4th, y to the 2nd. I'm going to raise the whole entire thing to the 3rd power. So very common mistake is you might remember that when you raise a power to a power, you're going to multiply. But this 4 is not an exponent, so that's where we want to be careful not to treat it like an exponent. The exponent that belongs to that whole number 4 is a 1 that we don't write. So if you wanted to follow the laws of exponents, you could say, you could keep the 4, and then you could do 3 times 1 that's there, which is 4 to the 3rd power. And then here we have an x, and then the exponent attached to it is a 4. So we're raising that exponent to an exponent, so 3 times 4 gives us 12. And then we have y to the 2nd being raised to the 3rd, so we're going to go ahead and multiply those. So 2 times 3 makes 6. Now, we can simplify this further because 4 to the 3rd power is the same as 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64, x to the 12th, y to the 6th, and that's my final answer. Let's see here. 7x, the whole entire thing, raised to the 0th power. Now, parentheses are important here. So if everything inside the parentheses is getting raised to the 0th power, then anything to the 0th power is just going to be 1. All right. But if instead I wrote it this way, 7x to the 0th power, then that 0 only belongs to the x. Where up here, because of the parentheses, the 0 is affecting everything inside the parentheses. So this one's a little different. This is 7 is going to stay the same, and then x to the 0th power is 1, so it's 7 times 1, and then now I have 7 times 1, which is just 7. So notice the difference in those